of a very strange kind, right? We end up seeing backdrops like mine here. We end up seeing a raised background, which is nice white walls and a white ceiling and white closets, etc. But you know, it also makes it so much more, in a sense, intimate. We are delighted to welcome Ray Cameron, who is the head of investment stewardship at BlackRock. So as you know, every year Larry Fink puts out a note which sort of describes in broad terms and sometimes quite specifically what their view of the world is, the view of investment, what their horizons look like, what their specific initiatives might be, what their general emphasis is going to be for the next year and beyond. And this year, he really shook people up by the opportunity he took to essentially talk about our environmental stewardship and our ESG kind of emphasis as a group of people, as humanity. And that kind of description of where BlackRock saw the importance of investing for the next several years moving forward, given the challenges we're all facing, was a remarkable inspiration. And we absolutely wanted to have someone from BlackRock join us for the conference. And Ray has a little story on that, but we're delighted to have him here. It's so much easier in lockdown, wouldn't you say, Ray, to be able to do this? Because otherwise,
in some ways, yes.
Yeah, it would have you otherwise come down to wherever we were going to do it in Minneapolis, more likely than not, and so on. So I won't bore anybody with any more details on that particular story, but you can certainly introduce yourself, Ray. Thank you so much for being here and for helping us round up the Ag Innovation Showcase at the back end. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And in terms of my bio, I think that was distributed. I actually won't spend any time on that, if that's okay. I will just ask participants to take a look at that. And I also, there's a pretty full description on LinkedIn. Suffice it to say that I've been at BlackRock for a little bit over 2 years, overseeing the investment stewardship practice for the Americas. We have a global footprint, and I'm responsible for the Americas, which includes America and Canada, as well as Latin America as well. So I thought I would spend my time today just giving you an overview of how BlackRock thinks about investment stewardship. I would try to keep my comments very focused and somewhat tight. I recognize that typically if we were in person, I would say that I'm the only thing standing between you and a cocktail, and that still may be true in a virtual sense. But I recognize that it's been a very productive and very full day and a half. And I hope that my closing comments will give you some insight into how BlackRock thinks about sustainability. So first of all, BlackRock itself is one of the largest, if not the largest, asset managers in the world. We're not an asset owner, we are an asset manager. In that we represent clients who are invested through us in a variety of products. Of the a little bit over $7 trillion that BlackRock has under management, half of that is in equities. And the 50% that's in equities, 90% of that is focused in index funds. The old moniker used to be passive. We call it index funds now, because if you look at the work that I'm going to describe that we're doing, it's anything but passive. We are really trying to encourage practices that really promote long-term returns and also sustainability. That long-term focus is really what drives us. Our clients, typically who have investment horizons of around plus 20 to 30 years, because most of the assets that are invested through the index side of the organization are retired to retirement or other long-term financial goals. We really are encouraging companies to have a long-term perspective in terms of the decisions that they're making. We try not to be too prescriptive in terms of our engagement with companies, but we are encouraging practices that we think promote long-term sustainability and resilience. The work that BlackRock does, is viewed through this lens of an investment function. The team bridges the various portfolio groups around the organization on a global basis, and we aim to deliver meaningful value to our clients through a range of activities. We engage on relationship management with the portfolio companies. We talk about the evolution of governance with companies in which we meet. including some assessment of their environmental and social factors that are material to companies' business practices. We proxy vote as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We provide market updates, we report to our clients, and we also engage in public policy debates. To give you a sense of the scale of the work that we do, the figures that I'm going to report are not for the most recent proxy voting season that ended in June, at the end of June, but these are for the prior year. We are actually getting ready to file our NPX filing. And so these figures that I'm about to report to you are the last prior reporting year. So ending in 2019. So we voted on over 16,000 shareholder proposals or shareholder meetings and over 150,000 proposals. And all of those have been verified through an independent third party. We held over 2,500 engagements on a global basis, and we participated in over 175 conferences and public events on a global basis. The stewardship team itself, we operate in 7 offices globally. We have over 45 members of the team, and we have footprints in 85 voting markets. I would also like to say that we leverage the global expertise of the portfolio managers around the organization, as well as researchers within BlackRock. But the work that we do is viewed as independent and is viewed as a part of the investment function. Larry talked about the work that we do in terms of really pushing the organization to focus more on sustainability and making it the center of all of our investment recommendations. Importantly, we are an important input into how the organization is thinking about sustainability and resilience. We have the largest dedicated stewardship team in the industry. We have a regional presence of the plus 45 individuals that I highlighted on the roughly we have a geographical representation of about a third in terms of geographical representation. So that gives you a sense of what our footprint is here in the US. And we share the unique insights that we get from engagements with our other counterparts around the organization. We try to be very transparent in the work that we do. If any of you have had an opportunity to go to our website and look up investment stewardship, you'll see that we're increasingly transparent around the work that we do. We have commentaries, we have voting guidelines, we have commentaries around engagements that we do, the 5 priority engagements, which I'll talk about. We also put out a sustainability report about a month and a half ago, which is a nod to the increased transparency that Larry talked about in his letter at the beginning of the year. And we also just put out our second global stewardship report for the quarter. And that gives some highlights and some case studies in terms of the work that we do. Another new feature, again, as a result of our commitment to transparency, is voting bulletins. We put out a number of voting bulletins over the course of the year. And in those voting bulletins, we highlight a particular company and we talk about the voting issues. We release it after the vote has been cast. And these are some very high profile situations. So I would encourage you to take a look at those. They to describe or give some insight into how we thought about a particular issue and why we voted a certain way. I've referenced that part of the work that we do is engage with portfolio companies. That is on a sector basis. So in the US and Europe, the teams are organized around sector responsibility or sector portfolio responsibility. We have 5 engagement priorities that we're focused on. Again, these are publicly available and I encourage you to take a look at them. I did want to spend a few minutes in just highlighting the other 5 engagement priorities. And these are, they anchor the conversations that we have with companies. The 5 are board quality, environmental risk and opportunities, corporate strategy and capital allocation, compensation that promotes long-termism, and human capital management. And what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes, just a couple minutes, just talking about each of those priorities and giving you a sense of how we think about them. So with respect to board quality, we focus on board effectiveness and also diversity as a key pillar of that. Boards are first and foremost decision-making bodies. As such, board composition and diversity, it matters. It sends a signal to the overall company. Companies that succeed or fail over time because of their people, we know that to be a pillar. And people in leadership positions have an outsized impact on long-term corporate performance. Environmental risk and opportunities. Here we expect the entire board to have to demonstrate fluency and how climate risk affects the business. We've been very public in our support of TCFD and SASB alignment in terms of disclosure mechanisms or frameworks. I'll talk about those in a little bit more later as well. The third one is corporate strategy and capital allocation. The investment case for companies, how they articulate a particular strategy, and how it's established through debate, continues around what or contributes to what makes long term. Basically, we're trying to understand the thought process behind the capital allocation, really not trying to be pandemic or prescriptive and suggest to the company what their long term capital should be. We're trying to understand how the company thinks about a strategy and how it fits with its stated purpose and culture and the other engagement priorities. We're really looking for alignment across those priorities. And then compensation that promotes long-termism. What's the key? The key purpose for executive compensation is to extract, reward, and retain competent directors, executives, and other staff who are fundamental to the long-term sustainable growth of the company. And so it's really important to understand that how the company is using compensation to promote those particular incentives. And then on human capital management, a company's approach to human capital management may vary across sectors, but it's clearly a factor in terms of business continuity and success. And we're certainly seeing that being brought to the forefront, particularly with COVID. A couple other things that I wanted to highlight. When we engage with a company, and engagement is when we reach out to have a conversation. It could be for a number of reasons. One is that during our voting process, we need clarification of a company's information. And so it will inform how we're voting. A second reason may be that there has been an event at the company that has impacted or may impact its long-term value. A third reason is that the company is in a sector or market where there is a thematic governance or a material issue that shareholders are very concerned about. A fourth may be that we've identified the company as lagging its peers on environmental, social, or government matters that could impact its economic value. And a fifth reason, which we see a lot, is companies request meetings to discuss substantive governance matters with us. We typically engage at the board level, at the senior executive level, and then with the various board members as it is necessary. The other point that I would make is that we tend to, in our engagements, we ask a lot of open-ended questions, really just trying to understand how the company thinks about its responsibility. We look for the board to really demonstrate that it is exercising its fiduciary responsibility and holding the management accountable. So in the next few minutes, I'd just like to talk about how we think about, how we engage with agribusiness companies on sustainable business practices. As I said, BlackRock is a fiduciary. Part of that responsibility is to help our clients protect and to grow the value of their assets. Again, they are the beneficial owners. BlackRock is not. We recognize that we are speaking on their behalf, and again, we take that responsibility very seriously. In January of this year, our investment stewardship team we put a more intense focus and engagement around companies on sustainability-related risk. We've talked about that with respect to Larry's letter. We engage with companies to encourage the adoption of business practices that support long-term value creation, which our clients really are dependent upon to achieve their long-term financial goals. I think it's important to underscore that the work that we do isn't new. We've been engaging with companies around ESG topics for a number of years or priorities for a number of years. And we put a lot of emphasis on governance. And that continues to be the case for us. Our experience shows that companies that get the governance piece of it right, they have the right individuals in place, they're effective in terms of their board composition and board and how the board executes itself and embraces its responsibilities. The board tends to make better decisions around the E and S categories. Modern society is very dependent upon sustainable agribusiness to ensure food security, quality, quantity, and safety. In many economies, the agriculture sector is credited with driving economic growth and addressing poverty. We've talked about some of that over the past few days, and all of you as being very involved in this ecosystem are very much aware of that. The expectations of the sector are really likely to increase as more and more efficient agricultural production is needed to provide for a growing global population and improving social conditions. We've heard that consistently. That's been a very consistent theme of the past day and a half. Sustainable agricultural practices aim to mitigate the environmental, ecological, and social pressures that can be exerted by the agriculture system when ensuring the reliability, the economic viability, and the sustainability of future resources. Poor practices in the sector can also result in environmental degradation and social harm. We know that, and we've seen multiple examples of that. These macro factors impact the long-term financial sustainability of companies in the agricultural sector and the companies in adjacent sectors that supply them with goods and services or rely on agricultural supply chains and products. We've seen that very much, particularly in the pandemic. Despite these challenges, producers must balance sustainable land management with the need to increase production of agricultural products to feed the growing populations of consumers demanding animal protein and safe, high quality, and affordable food. The climate is to produce more with fewer inputs. We've talked about that. And I think that this conference really does a great job in focusing on the important role that innovation plays and will continue to play in addressing some of these issues. Companies with agricultural businesses are increasingly scrutinized for the practices and could face heightened regulatory, legal, operational, and/or reputational risk. It's something, again, that's been talked about here in spades. BlackRock believes that companies with material E and S dependencies and impacts need to demonstrate high standards of operating practices. The areas of focus for engagements with us in this particular arena are related factors as relevant on environmental factors include land use, the management of climate risk, greenhouse gas emissions, illegal logging, biodiversity protection, and waste and water management. The areas of focus on social factors include protecting land rights, particularly those of indigenous people, workers' rights, health and safety, as well as working conditions, bribery and corruption prevention, humane farming practices, product reliability and traceability as well. In our engagements, we focus on board oversight. I've underscored the importance of the board, the role that the board plays. Oversight of management practices, operational resilience, and also disclosures that help investors understand the risk and the opportunities in the business that impact long-term sustainable performance. We are seeking to understand how the board ensures that the management is incorporating sustainable agricultural practices into the business, especially amid changing consumer expectations, regulations, and also a changing market focus. Among other things, we ask companies to disclose any incentives and externally developed codes of conduct to which they adhere to or to report on outcomes, ideally with some level of independent review. We also ask companies to disclose medium and long-term targets that are relevant to business practices that can help shareholders really understand how the company is making progress. And finally, we recognize that sustainable agriculture is an extensive and a complex issue with many interwoven dependencies. The ownership structure, for example, of many other companies in the sector, which have a single or a small group of affiliated shareholders that control the majority of the shares, also can limit the impact of engagement by a minority shareholder. And in some instances, that's the role that BlackRock plays. Even though we typically may be a top 3 to 5 shareholder, it may be that there is a controlling shareholder. We think that the need for government standards and enforcement cannot be underestimated. We will continue to engage to better understand and promote a company's sustainable practices. With that, I'll close my stated comments, and we can certainly entertain any questions that you all may have.
Thank you very much, Ray. Very, very, very informative and very interesting. Any particular comments that you had on the innovative solutions we've presented here at the showcase? I know you've been witness to quite a few of them yourself, and what kinds of tips you might give them in terms of what they're looking at and how they need to be able to build their own companies, apart from the fact that you've got these blocks that you've identified very closely and clearly for them to pay attention to in the overall context.
Well, the governance piece of it is really important, and increasingly we're seeing private companies actually reach out to us to ask us about our thoughts around, ESG factors as they are incorporating them in a very early stage. That's particularly true with some of the technology companies. The other thing that I would say is, to the extent possible, I know that there are trade secrets, but transparency, particularly with respect to the investment community, is really important. Understanding how the company holds itself accountable. I would also say that, from an innovative perspective, that has been showcased here, not only in terms of some of the companies, but also in terms of the composition of the individuals who are responsible for some of those innovations. I was particularly impressed to see that, there are a fair number of women who are, part of this particular conversation in this conference, who, were showcased in terms of some of the work that they're doing, and also some of the portfolio companies that were highlighted in terms of having a very high percentage of them being female. And so I think that those are things that are very important, and that the investment community will continue to pay very close attention to.
I'm very glad you mentioned that, because one of the driving forces behind this conference has also been my colleague Bandana Kachouch, who's online and who's always shy to show herself. But Bandana, do you have any particular points you'd like to be able to make in relation to what Ray was saying and the conversation we're having right now?
Sure. I think we have a lot of innovators in industry here. I think just for them to understand how this ESG in future, the governance structure for these particular goals can become part of their DNA, and should part of their DNA, almost as equivalent as a financial projection, because seems like a company like yours is starting to have a look at that and make that as an important element as you start investing in them.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say is that, from the work that I represent in terms of the index side of the organization, our investments tend to be on the public side. If it's a public company and is part of a particular index, that's where we will have our ownership. So it's not active ownership. What I would say is that what I will contribute, though, is that the parts of the organization where there is active ownership, part of Larry's push in his January letter was to underscore the fact that we are making sustainability a part of those particular investment strategies as well. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that looking at ESG factors and incorporating them into our due diligence across the organization, particularly on the active side, that's actually been part of our framework for the past 3 years. But we put more teeth into, and that's on a global basis, but we put more teeth into it and really made it the center of investing. And as we've seen through the first 6 months of the pandemic, that companies who have embraced ESG, kind of as whether it's on the pillars of thinking about their purpose and their culture and other factors, those companies, quite frankly, have outperformed very nicely for the first quarter and the second quarter of this year. There are a number of factors that contribute to that, but we certainly think that investing through an ESG lens is critically important. The other thing that I would highlight is that, I know that there is often a social component in terms of, thinking about some of the ESG factors. The S is social, right? But we tend to think about it more through an investment lens and really tying the engagement priorities back to the financial performance of the organization. And that's one of the reasons that we embraced frameworks like TCFD and SASB, because they look at the material financiality in terms of disclosures that are asked of a company and that are asked of companies. So it is financially relevant information that investors can use to make investment decisions around. So I think it's really important. ESG, I know that some people think is just a marketing phrase, but the reality is that it is really part of the investment landscape in terms of excellence and resilience and how companies really comport themselves.
So when you were looking in last 6 months on the indicators, which when you started looking at SASB materiality for these particular goals, what is the biggest challenge you faced from the companies when you started looking at them with their due diligence? Did you see that companies were not necessarily, because for our innovators, what can be helpful, acquisition is their final goal also, or being public.
Understood.
So I think it would be helpful for them to know how right from the beginning they can integrate those indicators which you look at during your due diligence and have that kind of bookkeeping ready for the companies like you when you start looking at them?
Well, again, we have a lot of information on our website. It's quite transparent in terms of how we think about our engagement priorities and the importance that we put on those. So, we'd like to reorder it. Instead of ESG, we call it GES because the governance is so important. And so focusing on the composition of the board, focusing on diversity at the board level as a signal to the broader organization that diversity is really important. We've talked about the importance of females, but diversity isn't just female. There's a broad definition of definition that includes race, ethnicity, that includes experience, and so there's a broader definition of diversity that we're pushing. And as you see from, particularly around the social unrest that is happening not only in America, but that's getting a lot of focus and attention. Race is going to be a very central part of the engagements as we go forward. But what I would say specific to your question is, the governance piece of it is critically important. We also recognize that many of the established or larger companies, they are the acquirers for a lot of these companies who are doing the innovation, and just recognize that those companies, as they are folding acquisitions into their organization, though these are the governance principles that they are embracing as well. So, either directly or indirectly, it is critically important in terms of how a company comports itself. In addition, when companies are thinking about acquisitions, depending on the size, sometimes it goes to a shareholder vote. But in our engagement with companies, when we talk about capital allocation and how they're thinking about, quote, innovation, acquisitions are often a critical component of how companies are thinking about that in terms of extending their own life cycle. We ask a lot of questions in terms of the types of companies that they're looking to acquire, the profile of those companies, and increasingly, the governance factors that we've talked about will be a part of those conversations as well.
So one of the key things also, Ray, is the fact that Larry's letter and the strategy that you're overseeing and you're developing are also signals to other financial institutions, other financial investors, and to the extent that they are sort of on board with the kind of discussion you've already generated, that would be important anyway as a ripple effect across the entire investment landscape for companies like the ones that we're talking about here. That comes down all the way to venture capital. It comes down to foundations. It comes down to philanthropy. It comes down to family offices. It becomes a more cohesive message that is sent out to them. And I really appreciate your work and the work that BlackRock is doing. Really, thank you very much for your time, Ray. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
It's been remarkably simple to be able to get you to come. Otherwise, I know how difficult it has been to get folks from the groups that you represent to come in a physical context. So from us virtually, great gratitude to you as well.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I think it's really important to understand how BlackRock thinks about, the governance landscape. We obviously have a very large platform, and we, again, take very seriously the work that we're doing. And again, we view it as, an input into investment decisions. And we think that that's really important for that message to get out. We are starting to engage with different parts of the ecosystem, if you will, in terms of the investment landscape. One is, on the activist side. And through that, they're getting involved in PEs, private equity, like transactions, et cetera, et cetera. Part of the conversations that they're having with us is increasingly, as they're bringing suggestions to us or they're targeting companies, is really through this governance lens in terms of improvements that they intend to make with the organizations. So we're starting to see this conversation filter into the private equity side of the world as well.
Great. We had some wonderful examples of
Yes.
social enterprises and others over the last year and a half. So really appreciate your attention to that as well. Thank you. Dan's
Absolutely.
my co-MC. If you have any particular points here, Dan.
I have a question for you, Rohit. Can we do our wrap from here, or do we need to go into the other room?
Let's ask the hosts. Vandana, can we do our wrap from here? Is that possible?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, I'll go on mute. Thank you all very much for the
Thank you so
opportunity.
much.
Thank you,
to be
Ray.
a part of this.
Thank you.
Ray.
Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. Okay, folks, we're at the back end of our wonderful day and a half, and we hope you enjoyed every bit of it. And if you haven't and you want to re-enjoy it, you have an opportunity to go and sample the content and hear it again, or revisit the various and sundry presentations and blocks that we've had in place. Remember the three thematic areas of the conference. These are going to be incredibly important. You heard from Ray already. These are clearly components of a broader strategy that the financial industry is putting in place, but also investors and others. And we intend to focus in more precisely on these goals as we move forward in the next few years. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to be here. We're going to be back. And we thank you for your time. Did you have any comments?
One that comes to mind is remember the many presenters in our block program, these innovators and entrepreneurs who are creating disruptive pieces and elements to the ecosystem. And remember that they need your support and they need your encouragement. And they're going to do some great work and change the world that we live in, I think, over time. The other piece, I think we should mention our platinum sponsors once again, Canadian Consulate
So
General.
I have actually, Dan, I do have a presentation really quickly. If you don't mind, Bandana and the others on the platform here, if you can actually show my screen, I'd appreciate it very much, and let me know when you can see it.
Oh, sure.
Continue on with that, just to be able to acknowledge the folks who've been so instrumental in putting on this this virtual event. That's been so different from the previous years that we've done. Let me know when you can see it.
But it was outstanding, I think, from start to finish. And I don't, there wasn't a weak link. Everybody brought their A game, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that coming from you as well, Dan. Let me know when you can see my presentation, because of course I've got it up here, so I'm not going to be able to see the what is being projected. Do I have to share my screen? I guess I do, huh?
Yes, you have to share your screen and then the PowerPoint, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for reminding me about that. Let's see, where are we? Here we go. So you can see this presumably?
Yeah. If you'll put it on PowerPoint mode, we should be good.
Yeah, I'm going to do that right now. Thank you all for staying with us. I really appreciate it. Let me just first of all thank our sponsors, the Platinum sponsors. Canada has been a great partner in this journey. They've been with us for 12 years, as we said earlier. And this year they brought together Protein Industries Canada, the Trade Commissioner Service, and of course, Global Affairs Canada as well, which is a really remarkable partnership, Agri-Food Canada as well. Our gold sponsor, OCP, you heard from them today. You heard also Yassine Cherkaoui, and you heard Amarjit Basra on the panel. And of course, our alumni sponsor, ISCA, which was on yesterday. Also, thank you to our supporting and community partners, AURI, American Made Challenges, Big Idea Ventures, the On-Ramp Agriculture Conference, which is Generator out of Wisconsin, a great group, Integram Labs from India, and UCLA's Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. Our podcast hosts, and again, I want to be able to plug our podcast because they were very thoughtfully presented. I thought, featuring many of our speakers here in the conference, Michael Dimmick and Roger Wasson. Michael Dimmick from Roots of Change and Roger Wasson from Farm to Table. They're both experienced podcast hosts. And of course, our Master of Ceremonies, Dan Scogan. Thank you, Dan, for doing yeoman work and really being a compliment and an asset to us. Really appreciate it. Our keynote speakers, Ray, we just heard from, Rob Trice last evening, this morning, Ted McKinney, and Jack Bobo, of course, setting us off on our journey for the last day and a half. Our moderators, conversationalists, and speakers from day one, quite a collection of people, I have to say, with extraordinary diverse experiences and depth. Also, our conversationalists and speakers on day two, rounding off with a wonderful panel of women farmers as well, moderated by Jen Wagner. our special content hosts and guests. We had Canada with a remarkable set of companies that are doing remarkable things, selected for the AgTech Accelerator Program, and of course the financial panel on funding the transition to climate resilient agriculture. Our alumni speakers, and you've heard from all of them today and yesterday, presenting companies. Without you, this conference would be like any other. You really brought your A game to the table here. We really appreciate your ability to link to the kinds of goals that we set for the conference itself. And finally, I did want to be able to point to, I mentioned it briefly, this would not have been possible without these people, in particular Bandana Katoch, my colleague who helped shape the program, both of us together. Bandana, thank you so much. You've done a remarkable job of being able to realize the vision we've had for such a long period of time. And her colleagues, Ayelet Maram and Lars Banquin, thank you both for, there's Ayelet, and I don't know where Lars is, he's in the background there. Thank you very much for extraordinary work, really hard to do, by the way, hard work, especially when it's virtual, and we're all virtual as well. Laura Cheek and Gabriel Munoz, who is doing our work on marketing and promotion and social media, very strong focus this year on being able to engage with the whole community of folks on the outside, and on business development, Carlos Gutierrez, who has so many of the relationships that we have with the external and outside world. And a lot of staff. We're a small organization, a slim organization with an enormous footprint, which does a lot of things and does them well, and does them with a sense of ownership and pride, and a diverse group of people as well, if I can say so. And thank you to the community, the Ag Showcase community. This is really a community event. It is not this rah, big 1,000-person event. It never has been. It's very different in virtual mode. It's very weird in some ways in virtual mode. It does have its compensations, obviously, but sorry if you've had any issues at all, both not just with the technology, but with the need to scramble from one session to the other. As I said in the very beginning, we didn't have to do too much of a scrambling job, because the recordings are available to you and will be available to you for the next year. To our innovators, we look forward to engaging with you on an ongoing basis. You are part of this group now and part of our network, and please look to us for the kinds of connectivity that you are always seeking. We're looking forward to greater clarity and comfort in the next year, and a different kind of event. I mean, I don't think we'd ever go back to a full in-person event. We will always have to have this as a hybrid, because it engages so many more people from such a diverse geography around the world. And so with that, I will just bid you farewell, adieu, and thank you so much for your participation, your time. We hope you'll be back with us. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you. See you all in 2021.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
So funny. We wish we had a marching band of something to see, or something like that, to see us off, but we don't. So.
Hey, thank you, and thanks your team for all their good work.
Dan, thank you very much, and thank you for all that you brought to the table as well. You've been a remarkable asset to us, and we appreciate it very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye, everyone.